Okay, the next crazy thing in the Bible is there's a dragon.
Yes, there is.
Okay. And this one's in Revelation.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Only in Revelation.
Only in Revelation.
They never talk about dragons anywhere else.
Nope, just here.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So in Revelation...
Do this one now.
Yeah. So in Revelation chapter 12, it speaks about a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it speaks...
I like this story.
Okay.
This is the story about the woman with the son.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, the story in of itself is crazy.
Yes.
And then you bring a dragon into it,
Right.
and it gets even weirder.
I like
seemingly.
this one.
Okay.
This is my favorite part of the Bible.
This one chapter
Yes.
is? And what's interesting about this chapter is that it's actually kind of an interlude in the midst of everything else that's going on in the midst of
Yes.
Revelation. It's just like you have all these like the seals and all that, and then all of a sudden it's like woman, child, dragon, right? And so, but yeah, a dragon is introduced, and so you want to read the story, or you want me to just tell about the dragon?
I mean, just tell the story. Don't read the story.
All right.
It's like a whole chapter, right?
Yeah, it's like a whole chapter.
Yeah, okay.
So so there's...
Go read it yourselves.
Yes. We encourage you to go read it yourselves. All right.
Because it's cool.
Because it's fantastic. All right. In Revelation 12, so there's this woman, and she's pregnant, okay?
Yep.
And then she's about to give birth, and then all of a sudden this dragon appears.
Right.
So in verse 3, it says, then another sign appeared in the heaven.
But she's wearing the sun.
There's a... Right.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, she's clothed with the sun. That's correct. And so moon's under her feet, right? Crown of 12 stars on her head.
Yep.
All that's there. And so there's a dragon. The dragon says it has 7 heads and 10 horns. And on its heads were 7 crowns. So
Seems
heads,
like those would
horns,
fall off.
crowns. Its tail swept away a third of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth.
I'm pretty sure I tried to put 7 crowns on me at least at Burger King one time, and that just doesn't work.
Did it not? Your head didn't hold all 7?
No.
Well, but again, remember, they've got 7 heads, so it can be a crown per head.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you probably were able to keep 1 Burger King crown on your head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good. All right. So its tail swept away a third.
I had it my way.
I bet you did. All right. So yeah, then there's this dragon, and then she gives birth to a son, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the dragon is upset about it. And then it says in verse 7, then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon.
Okay.
The dragon and his angels also fought, but he could not prevail. There's no place for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent. And this is kind of alluding back to Genesis 3.
Oh.
All right?
The talking
snake. The ancient serpent.
So the snake is now a dragon.
Right.
Okay.
Who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was thrown to earth and his angels with him. And so, and obviously you see in here, a lot of people talk about the fact that, okay, this is where, Satan is actually thrown out of heaven with a third of the angels. Okay. And they pull that from this, but whether that can actually be pulled from here or not is, I think, up for debate because of the context of this.
Okay.
Because it seems to be speaking of another time, right? Of a future time.
Okay.
And so
who is this woman?
Man, that's a whole nother episode. I mean, honestly, okay. Because it's like some people will say the woman is Mary. Okay.
Okay.
Some people will say the woman.
The Catholics say it was Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the son that was given birth to Jesus, right?
Right. Okay.
And so dragon against Jesus. Others will say, no, this is looking in the future, and this is more symbolic than actually literal.
Okay.
And so it's actually referring to the bride of Christ. And then
us?
Yeah, us. And
so
but
who's
then
the kid?
Right, but then there's another theory that I've read by another scholar, and so he actually believes this will be almost like virgin birth kind of thing happening again, but future, but not with messiahs but with
Okay.
future kids,
Now I have to know everything about this.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's so many kind of theories on this. It's kind of wild.
We have to do end times.
We should do it in time. Yeah, we should do end times episodes.
Which is going to take a year.
They're crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's so many theories on everything, right? And you have to get into the, are you amillennial, premillennial,
okay, so what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah. I say drugs. That's what I'm going with this whole time.
I know. Everything's drugs.
Yeah.
To be honest with you on this one, I'm not really sure. Because this one is, again, it's an interlude thrown into Revelation in some ways. So
where'd we get dragons from then?
Right.
Because this just shows up here at the end.
Yeah, it does.
So did dragons used to exist?
Well, at least the thought of dragons did. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he's obviously pulling from something, that the world would have known about.
Okay.
Not saying there necessarily were dragons, but that they, at least the stories, the creation of dragons and, kind of imagination has already happened at this point. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and because what's interesting in this particular passage is that, again, it talks about the woman flees to the wilderness. A place is prepared for her by God to be nourished there for 1,260 days. And that 1,260 days is an important thing. That's 3.5 years. And so you hear, this is where we can get into kind of the end time stuff, the timeline and the 3.5 years. And when does the rapture happen, not happen? When does the judgment happen or not happen? All that kind of stuff. So
I just want to talk about dragons.
All right. Well, let's keep talking about dragons.
Okay.
How about we? And so there in Revelation 9, again, dragon is thrown out, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan. Okay. And then later on in Revelation chapter 20, where the dragon, we see a picture of the dragon once again in chapter 20, verse 2, he sees the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss, closed it, put a seal on it, so that he would no longer deceive the nations until 1,000 years were completed. And so this is during the millennial reign of Christ, Satan is bound.
On earth?
On earth. Yes.
Wait, Satan's bound in an abyss, but Jesus is on earth?
But Jesus is on earth.
For 1,000 years.
For 1,000 years. That's correct.
In the end times.
In the end times, correct.
Why? Why not just take us to heaven?
Well, okay.
Screw this place.
Yeah.
Why do we got to stay here?
All right, but see, so that's one of the interesting things. Most people think that our eternity is in heaven, but it's actually not. Because, all right, heaven.
Oh, right. It's in
new creation.
Earth
Right.
too.
It's in new creation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in new creation.
All right.
Right. And so actually our home forever will be the new creation here. Okay.
And we don't know what that's going to be like.
Well, we have some pictures of it in Revelation.
There's just not going to be dragons.
Revelation 21:22. You're right. There will be no dragons. Because again, we're saying dragon, but it's not a literal dragon. Like in Revelation, this is not a literal dragon.
Okay.
It's because it's Satan, right? It's Satan.
So he could be whatever he wants.
Right. So Satan's not a dragon.
Right?
Right.
He could show up however he wants to look.
Yeah. Well, in other words, I see like a shapeshifter.
Right.
I don't know if Satan is a shapeshifter.
All right.
I do think he is able. He and the demonic, the demons, the demonic angels, they're able to obviously enter in, possess, influence beings.
So real dragon.
So you're going back to real dragon. Yeah, I'm going to say no to the real dragon.
Okay.
But
so you don't know it, but
it's
whatever it says in the Bible
whatever
isn't
Satan
true.
looks like. I think that's a whole other thing too, right?
Right.
We're not actually sure what Satan actually looks like.
Okay.
So do I think he's a dragon? No. Do I know what he actually looks like? No.
Okay.
Because that's not clear here either. Yeah.
Okay, so dragons aren't real.
No. Dragons aren't real.
Even though there's one in the Bible.
And this is the thing. Because this is the thing with Revelation,
So
right?
all the other ones that we've talked about so far are actual stuff.
I'm going.
But this one's not.
Right. I know that sounds crazy.
Okay.
But here's why. Because it's, again, it's, it's talking about like like when you read.
I guess you can't wear the sun either.
Right. That's what I was
Okay.
going to get to. Like Revelation is so symbolic in nature.
Yeah.
That you have to read it. And I think this is one of the things where that's actually an important thing to note about all of this is, when we're reading things like Revelation, for example, it's apocalyptic literature. So we have to read it as if it's apocalyptic literature. And I think where what I'm getting to here is
like The Walking Dead.
Is Walking, I guess, Walking Dead, sure. Yeah. I mean, like, my point is being is like when you read the Bible, it's interesting. Like people will be like, well, no, you have to read it literally or just not literally at all or whatever. I'm like, no, you read it according to the genre of the book you're reading.
Okay.
So, for example, when I read Genesis is a historical book.
Okay.
So I read it as a historical book. Therefore, that's why when I read Genesis 3, I don't read it as fable. I read it as a historical book, right? When I read things like the story of Job, or when I'm reading, that's, or Ecclesiastes or whatever, that's wisdom literature. So I'm going to read that as wisdom literature. When I'm reading the Psalms, that's poetry. So I'm going to read it as poetry. I'm not going to take all that literal because it's poetry, right?
And Revelation is just nonsense.
Yeah. Well, Revelation, and then you have parts of Daniel, and some other parts throughout Scripture, but Daniel, Revelation, you have a lot of apocalyptic literature. So you have to read it as apocalyptic literature, which means it's going to have a lot of symbolism, right?
What other anything is considered apocalyptic literature outside the Bible?
Oh, well, so there's already apocalyptic literature occurring in like the ancient Near East. So this isn't like this isn't like a new, like, we're not coming up with like a new genre.
Okay.
You're right. Because even like the ancient Near East, like there's like when we were talking about the seraphim and the cherubim earlier, like they even had their own stories
about those things,
about cherubs. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so
that's
like,
what I know cherubs are.
Okay.
Right.
Maybe.
Is that what, did they turn them into babies with bows and arrows?
No, we did
Isn't that those things?
Yeah. That happened a little later.
Okay.
Yes. But yes. And so but what I'm saying is like, we do realize that there's all this, like, like the Bible doesn't have, the first poetic literature, right? Like there's, in other words, as the people of Israel are growing up in the nation surrounding them in the ancient Near East, there's all this other form of literature happening, right?
Okay.
And so like, for example, in the ancient Near East, you hear a lot of other flood stories.
Right.
But the flood story is not right. Bingo. Gilgamesh. Mm-hmm. Right. And there are people that be like, well,
which was written hundreds of years before the Bible, so this one's the real one or whatever.
Right. And that's
the Bible stole it from this.
Correct.
And blah, blah, blah.
And that's one of the arguments, right?
Yeah.
And so, and so there's all these other flood stories. And so, the Bible doesn't have the only flood story.
Right.
But I think that's interesting because I think it actually probably lends itself to the fact that there's all the other flood stories from all the other nations. There probably was a flood.
Right.
Now it's a matter of, well, how do we interpret how that
flood is the right flood?
Right.
Okay.
How did that flood happen? How did it occur? Why did it occur? Those kind of things, right?
Okay. So did the dragon talk?
Did the dragon talk like as a dragon?
No, as like a
person,
as like a donkey, as if like a donkey would talk.
Okay. No, we don't have dragon talking.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
All
Only
right.
talking serpent and talking donkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the dragon's not real.
No.
All right.
The dragon's symbolic.
Cool.
As far as I'm concerned.
Now I don't like that verse anymore.
Well, I'm sorry to ruin the whole story.
I want to see a dragon.
Okay.
You know what the end times needs though?
What does the end times need, Nick?
What one of those like 7:30 a.m. is a meet and greet, and then 8 a.m. is our first session. Like one of those things. What are those called?
What
An
are you talking-
itinerary?
Yeah, you need an itinerary.
Yeah.
Of what's going
Like,
on.
what are we doing all weekend? Type thing. Like,
Well, okay. Why do the end times need an itinerary?
Because nobody knows what
Well, the
order to put anything in.
Right.
And God needs to send us one of those.
Well, I think he
So that we can all not talk about this anymore.
yeah, he kind of did give us an itinerary a little bit,
But nobody knows when things are happening.
but we're told no one's going to know when it's all like. In other words,
But
like
what if we show up late?
if you show up
How are we
late,
supposed to know?
if you show up late, you got left out
Okay.
on purpose. And that's not a good thing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Oh, right. During that part. Okay.
right. You don't want to get left out.
Okay.
Right, but
I'll just blame it on the fact that I didn't have an itinerary.
But in saying that, I also don't believe like this is like I don't like I say left out. I think so. Christ is coming. I think the question is like when is he actually coming? Right
In the end times.
in the end times, and then how that plays itself out. Who knows? Because you have the people that are like,
That's what I'm
oh,
saying.
like you have like the pre-trib people. They have like their maps and charts and those kind of things, and you got mid-trib people. Here's their maps and charts, and then you got post-trib people, and here's their maps and charts, and
Yeah.
so yeah, everybody's got their maps and charts.
I'm going to hope I'm dead before that. All the dead people already don't have to do any of this, right? They
Right.
can just stay in heaven and watch.
Right, we're just in heaven.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So more than likely,
I hope that's what happens.
Yeah, more than likely, you and I will already be dead by the time all this starts.
Yeah. I don't want to deal
playing
with it.
out. Right. Well, you don't have to, so it's
Yeah.
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And then at some point you'll just get to come back with Christ. And hey, talking about animals, he's coming back on a horse.
What does it talk?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
No, but he's got a horse.
Jesus has a horse?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm kind of hoping we get to come
Hope
back on
it's-
horses too.
It better have a cool name.
Well, I don't know what the
Yeah.
name of it is, but
Okay.
yeah, but it says he's coming back on a horse. So I'm kind of hoping that we get to have a horse. Like, that would be awesome.
Oh. We all get our own horse
Yeah, we all get to come flying back in.
in new
Like,
creation.
yeah,
Does the
like-
horse have wings?
yeah. Like, let's read about the horse.
All right, next question. The talking horse.
All right, there's not a talking horse.
Wait, this horse has wings though?
no, I don't know if the horse has like. All right, let me just read about the horse.
All right.
Okay. All right. Verse 11. Then all right.
Of what?
All right. I'm sorry. Sorry, we're still in Revelation.
Okay.
Chapter 19, verse 11.
All right.
Then I saw heaven opened, and there was a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and with justice he judges and makes war. So, and then we're going to skip down to verse 14. The armies that were in heaven followed him on white horses, wearing pure white linen. So I don't think there's wings on these horses, but maybe there are. I don't know. But there's horses.
They can at least fly.
Yeah, and I'm hoping right. I mean,
Somehow they get down here.
right, and so
Unless we all just fall.
heaven opens and we just
Yeah.
yeah. So no,
Dun, dun, dun.
but and it says the armies that were in heaven followed him on white horses. I'm kind of hoping that's us.
Okay.
Yeah, so that we'd have horses.
Were the
too.
horses wearing the clothes, the linens, or the people wearing the linens?
The armies, the people are wearing
Okay.
the linen. Yeah,
All right.
the pure white linen.
So there's flying horses.
yeah, so there's some. So apparently there's flying horses too.
Okay.
Right.
Great. I want a flying horse.
That's what I'm saying. Who don't want a flying
Yeah.
horse?
I keep saying that though. I don't know why we're trying so hard to have flying cars when we haven't figured out flying horses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like we're skipping forward a step when that's the next step that we
Right.
should take.
Obviously, the horse has
Yeah.
to fly
Yeah.
before the car.
Right.
That perfect sense.
I mean, makes sense.
perfect. I mean, 100%. Yeah.
Cool.
We're putting the car before the horse.
Yes.
Sweet.
Which doesn't make sense. Congratulations. You're a
welcome.
doctor. All right. Cool. Enough about dragons and horses.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah. I'm good.
Next.